Every so often, when you watch television, you run across a commercial that has a nice, powerful message, kind of grabs your heart. State Farm had such a commercial about 4 years ago. And what we're able to do this week is the gal who puts our PowerPoints together, she reduced the commercial down to 25 seconds just to get to the part that grabs a person's heart. So let's just take a look at this commercial for a couple moments.
I am never getting married.
Never.
Guaranteed.
You picked a beautiful ring.
Thank you. We're never having kids.
Come over here.
We are never moving to the suburbs.
We are never getting one of those. We're never having another kid.
I'm pregnant.
I'm never letting go.
You know, I watch that commercial often. I'll turn on YouTube and just watch the full commercial stuff. That was just a 25-second clip. That young father, that young husband, as he sits on the couch with the wife and his daughters, he recognizes what is most important in his life, and that is his family. He's never going to let go. You could just feel what he is saying and kind of concur, yes, if I were sitting in that position, I would naturally say the same thing. Often in life, however, we fail to recognize and realize what is right in front of us. We don't realize the blessings God has given to us to see, to enjoy, and to appreciate. Now, that's what went wrong in today's gospel reading. There are two disciples in today's gospel reading that commit the incredible infraction of not realizing who Jesus Christ was. Let's take a look at verse out of today's gospel reading. Let's take a look at verse 13 and 14 and verse 37. Now, it starts off by saying, we're going to look at the top part first. On the evening of the first day of the week, two disciples of Jesus were walking to Emmaus, discussing the things that had taken place. Now, that very first part, in the evening of the first day of the week, that's a reference to Sunday. That's Sunday. This is the same Sunday in which Jesus Christ resurrected. He resurrected in the morning. Now it's Sunday night. And these two disciples, they're not named. They're not named as Simon Peter, James, and John. That allows them to be fluid. It could be any one of the original 12 disciples. Actually, as we are disciples nowadays, it could be any one of us who do not recognize Christ in our lives, and He's working in our lives all the time. Now, these two disciples were walking to Emmaus. Emmaus was a small town about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They're headed over to Emmaus, and they're discussing all the things that had taken place. So they're actually talking about Jesus Christ. Christ is on their mind. He's on their lips. They're talking about His crucifixion. They're talking about His resurrection. And it's amazing, talking about Jesus Christ, look at what happens. Let's pick up where I left off. Now these two disciples, were still speaking about this. He, Jesus, stood in the midst, and He said to them, "Peace be with you." But they were startled and terrified and thought they were seeing a ghost. Verses 36 and 37, 24th chapter of Luke. Isn't that amazing? They're actually talking about Jesus Christ. They're discussing all the things that took place these last few days. Jesus stands right in front of them. "Peace be with you," He says, and they don't recognize Him. How can they not recognize Jesus Christ? You see, the way that Jesus Christ looked physically before He was crucified, the way He looked after He resurrected, was the exact same look. He didn't undergo some type of metamorphosis. He wasn't wearing some kind of costume, some kind of disguise. It was Him. And He's standing right there in front of them, and they don't recognize Him. How often in life that happens? You see, these were the very disciples that said yes when Jesus Christ handpicked them. They had spent huge amounts of time with Jesus Christ. They had watched Jesus Christ walk the road to Calvary. They watched Jesus Christ take His last breath. They mourned the loss of Jesus Christ. And now they don't recognize Him. 3 days after Jesus Christ is crucified, just hours after Jesus Christ resurrects, Jesus Christ stands in front of them and He says, "Peace be with you." And they were startled, terrified. They thought they were seeing a ghost. Why didn't they recognize Him? He's right there, the same fella. They were looking, but they weren't seeing. They failed to recognize. They didn't have the gift of recognition. Now, there was some years ago, probably about 10 years ago now, this young man who was 19 years old, he came to my office one day, and he was very despondent, very discouraged, very depressed. He was struggling with something for 19 years. And so we're talking, and in the midst of his tears, he finally tells me what's going on in his life. He told me he spent his entire life trying to make his father happy, and it isn't working. He said to me, Father Ken, my dad has never spoken to me. So I thought, well, maybe they don't have conversation. What do you mean he's never spoken to you? Well, he never says anything to me. He hasn't actually talked to me almost my whole life. Anything he says to me is a complaint rather than a compliment. That's all I hear from my father. I've tried to make him happy, and it just doesn't work. He said, I know for a fact I have disappointed my father. I'm a disappointment to him. I am not the son he wanted. I'm not sure what he wanted, but whatever type of son he wanted, it's not me. He wanted someone else. I don't know who. He said, I know my father wanted a son that was into football and basketball and sports and outgoing. I'm none of those things. I'm not athletic. I like to stay in the house. I'm a big disappointment. As he was discussing this disappointment he had about not living up to the ideals of his father, these massive tears are just rolling down his eyes. He said, when my dad looks at me, he looks through me, beyond me, around me, but he actually never sees me. It's amazing when he looks at me, I could just tell that I'm not in his vision. I gave him things to do before he left my office. It was 3 days later, this young man committed suicide. He was just hurting so much. It just had accumulated. And it was a volcano ready to erupt inside of his heart. He just couldn't take it anymore. He just couldn't take not pleasing his father. The funeral home, because I was going to have the funeral the next day, and the viewing hour was 7 to 9 at night, this one night. When I got to the funeral home about 8:45, I'd heard that the place was jam-packed prior to that, but by 8:45, it had just whittled down to just a few people left there. And one of the people still in the funeral home was this young man's father. I was just standing there talking to a few people, and I went up to the casket to say a few prayers. And afterward, we're just kind of mulling around. The funeral director told us that he wanted to begin to shut the lights off, lock the doors, and go home. It would now be time to leave. And what I found amazing is this father walked up to the casket of his son. I could still see him doing it. He walks up to the casket of his son. He looks in the casket. I'm standing back a piece. He starts to cry. And then he yells out, son, I love you, and he bent down and hugged him. Now, I didn't say a word to the father, but I said to myself, you have missed the boat. Had you said to your son before he committed suicide, while he was still alive, son, I love you, and hugged him, he would still be alive today. I'm positive of that. Because his greatest pain was the fact that his father didn't recognize him as a son. He just didn't love him. And when his heart is just breaking, the father, he tells his son, I love you, and gives him a hug. The father failed to recognize and realize what was right in front of him. How often we do that in life. How often husbands and wives feel to realize what's right in front of them. They think some other wife or some other husband would be better than one they have. And sometimes they destroy everything as they attempt to find out. They don't realize that, boy, what I have right here, I'm just never going to let go. Let's just watch this little 25-second clip again, because maybe now it will have even more impact on you.
I am never getting married.
Never.
Guaranteed.
You picked a beautiful ring.
Thank you.
We're never having kids.
A little bit here.
We are never moving to the suburbs.
We are never getting one of those. We're never having another kid.
I'm pregnant.
I'm never letting go. I'm never letting go. I'm never letting go.
What you pray for at night. Whatever you pray for at night, always include the prayer of recognition. Now, maybe you're lucky enough to realize in front of your life, and perhaps you appreciate everything you have. And if that be the case, continue to allow it to be the case. But if you don't realize what you have in front of you, you don't recognize what you have in front of you, Heavenly Father, give me the gift of recognition to realize what I have right in front of me. I just love that, Father. Just go on YouTube and type in State Farm commercial. I watch this thing probably once a week. I know it by heart. I just enjoy it. The whole commercial. But that father was right. I'm never letting go, because he realized what? My life now, not when I was a single man running around, but now my life is my 2 kids and my wife, and we're all nestled on the corner of that couch and that big house, but his world was just as small as that couch. That corner of the couch was everything to him, and he realized it. Heavenly Father, give me the gift of recognition. Help me to realize what I have while I have it, not after it is gone.